Hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 2nd August 2024, Friday, and today we have few important articles for the discussion, right? So all these articles that we are going to discuss in this session are very important from the exam point of view, right? So one by one we'll discuss all those important articles, and let's get into the discussion. Yesterday I have given you one prelims practice question, and this question is with respect to the monetary policy, right? So RBI has a monetary policy committee, and monetary policy committee takes important decisions regarding the monetary policy in India. So however, the monetary policy decisions are taken with respect to a certain objectives in these objectives would be kept in mind whenever these monetary policy decisions are being taken, right? So question is, which of the following is the primary objective of monetary policy in India? So that is the question, and options are: option A, tackling stressed assets of banks; option B, maintaining low levels of unemployment; option C, appreciate the exchange value of rupee in forex markets; option D, maintaining price stability. Right? So when we talk about monetary policy, its primary objectives are keeping inflation under control and at the same time maintaining the price stability. So the correct answer for this question is option D. This is a very basic and generic question. And even if you have some basics in economy about inflation, about monetary policy, you can answer this question. So therefore the correct answer for this question is option D. And if you look at the explanation, so explanation is also given, right? So you can also go through all the objectives of monetary policy, right? So stability of exchange rate, ensuring price stability in an economy so that inflation would be under control, full employment or adequate gainful employment opportunities for the youth in the economy, and ensuring economic growth, right? So inflation would impact economic growth, so ensuring economic growth is also one of the objective of monetary policy. And even ensuring equilibrium in the balance of payments is also another objective of the monetary policy. So these are all the objectives of monetary policy. You just keep them in mind because they are also important, like how monetary policy objective is price stability. So these objectives should also be asked in the examination, right? However, when we talk about the main objective of the monetary policy, so its main objective is maintaining price stability or ensuring price stability and controlling inflation and stimulation of the economic growth, and even management of the exchange rate in the Indian rupee or of the Indian rupee. So these are the primary and basic objectives of monetary policy when we talk about this. And one more practice question for prelims examination, and this is also a very easy question, because if you go through all the fundamental rights, right to equality and right to freedom of speech and expression, so every fundamental right, so if you go through all the fundamental rights, you can easily answer this question. And the very same nature of question UPSC has asked before also, right? The question is, right to equality in the Indian Constitution does not include this particular right. So options are: prohibition on discrimination on ground of religion; option B, rights of accused and convicted individuals; option C, abolition of titles; and option D, equality of opportunity in employment, right? So if you know all the fundamental rights, if you have a basic understanding, you can answer this question. Try to answer this question in the comment section, right? So let's start this discussion with the first very important article in Money Bill. Regarding Money Bill, we have already discussed, and again there is an article, there is an editorial about the Money Bill, because a certain sections have approached the Supreme Court. They have filed a petition that the Money Bill route is being used increasingly by the government or by the Council of Ministers to bypass the Rajya Sabha. So therefore they have approached the Supreme Court to pass a clear guidelines over the Money Bill route, right? So the heading here is that a verdict on the Money Bill that India awaits, so that the government will not misuse the Money Bill route to pass the ordinary bills, because ordinary bills, when they are introduced in the Lok Sabha, So they have to get the approval of the Rajya Sabha also. Rajya Sabha has to done a detailed debate, discussion, and even the scrutiny of the bill. However, what the government has been doing, the government, in order to bypass the upper house, so most of the bills are being passed as a money bills, and that is considered as unconstitutional, and Supreme Court, a petition is also filed in the Supreme Court regarding this. So this is a brief context about the money bill and increasing instances of misuse of money bill, right? So in the coming weeks, so this month itself, in the coming weeks, a 7-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court slated to hear arguments over some of the critical questions, those critical questions essentially governing the money bill in India. Okay, so when we talk about the money bill, so money bill has a certain provisions which are mentioned in Article 110 of the Indian Constitution, right? So you can see here, according to Article 110 of the Constitution, a bill is deemed to be a money bill only it deals with the certain criteria which is mentioned in the Article 110. For example, if I can say that Article 110 clause 1 subclause A to subclause G deals with certain matters, right? For example, taxation or borrowing by the government of India, and even appropriation of the money from the consolidated fund of India. So all these things from subclause A to subclause D would deal with the money bill in India, right? So in fact, Article 110 clause 1 subclause G adds that any matter incidental to any of the matters which are being specified from Article 110 clause 1 clause A to clause F can also be classified as the money bills. Okay, so in fact, the government has cited this clause to introduce legislation, because previously also government introduced the Aadhaar bill, right? So Aadhaar bill as a money bill, even though Aadhaar bill in its true nature is not a money bill, but the government has passed Aadhaar bill as money bill in the year 2016, right? So it was also a contested, because the government trying to evade the upper house by marking certain bills as money bills, right? The right to identify, a right to, the right to approve any bill as a money bill is given to the Lok Sabha Speaker, and he is the final authority to decide any bill whether it is a money bill or not. So Speaker is from ruling party. So that's why, so most of the bills in recent times are being passed as money bills, and the Speaker's approval is also being given to such bills. Okay, so recently amendments were also made to the Money Laundering Act, and which were also contested, that this bill and the provisions of the bill does not deal with any of the provisions under Article 110 from clause 1 to clause G. So therefore it should not be a money bill. However, for any bill to be enacted in the parliament, the approval of the both houses of the parliament is required. So there is no doubt about that. If any bill is being introduced in the parliament, it requires the approval of both houses of the parliament. But with respect to money bill, there is a special procedure, right? So what is that special procedure? So the special procedure mandates that money bill can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha but not in the Rajya Sabha. And in fact, Lok Sabha, once it passes the money bill, then it transfers the bill to the Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha can actually discuss the bill, but it cannot reject the money bill. However, Rajya Sabha can actually suggest amendments to the money bill, and then if there are any amendments that Rajya Sabha wanted to suggest, then it can transmit the bill to the Lok Sabha again. However, it is up to the Lok Sabha to decide whether those recommendations would be accepted or not. Right? So if Lok Sabha is not interested in those recommendations, if Lok Sabha don't want to make any amendments, so then also there is no need to pass the bill again to the Rajya Sabha. So Lok Sabha can directly send the bill to the assent of the president. So that is the special procedure with respect to the money bills, right? So if a dispute arises over whether a bill is money bill or not, for example, the government has introduced a money bill, right? Because money bills are only introduced by the government alone. The council of ministers alone can introduce a money bill in the Lok Sabha. So if there is any question, any dispute over whether a bill is money bill or not, so Lok Sabha speaker's decision is final, and he would be the ultimate authority to take a decision over a bill whether it is a money bill or not. However, in the year 2018, the Supreme Court has stated that the decision is subjected to judicial scrutiny. So what decision? The decision of the speaker whether the bill is money bill or not. So that particular decision would also come under the judicial scrutiny of the Supreme Court. So this is what the Supreme Court has told in the year 2018. However, despite this, there is a frequent and regular misuse of money bill route to bypass the upper house. So that's why the 7-judge bench of the Supreme Court has decided to hear about this money bill route that is being misused, right? So with reference to 7-judge bench emanates out of a verdict. So that was, the verdict was declared in November 2019. The case was Roger Matthew versus South Indian Bank Limited. So which the Finance Act of 2017 was under the challenge in the Roger Matthew versus South Indian Bank Limited. And in fact, the Finance Act was passed after the certification of this bill as a money bill. And in fact, this Finance Act of 2017 has been radically altered, or it has radically altered the authority and jurisdiction of 26 different tribunals across the country. However, it is being contested that this, despite not having a provisions with respect to the money bill, Finance Act of 2017 was passed as a money bill. Right, so we have discussed all the articles which deals with a money bill, right? So for example, when we talk about the constitutional structure or different articles which are talking about the money bill and certain financial bills, so which are also which are also passed through the same procedure as money bills. For any bill to become a law, it must obtain the sanction of both houses of the parliament. However, the only exception here is that if it contains any provisions under Article 109, so that allows, Article 109 actually allows money bills to be enacted as a law with only Lok Sabha's approval. Right, so this we have already discussed, because any bill to be passed as a money bill, Lok Sabha's approval is very, very important, or it is necessary. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. Right, so Article 110 clause 1, so right, so it specifically defines money bill, right? So it deals with what exactly is a money bill, as we have already discussed previously, that Article 110 clause 1 to subclause A and subclause G would deal with the money bills, right? For example, matters with respect to imposition or abolition of a tax, the regulation of borrowing of money, the appropriation of cash out of the consolidated fund of India, or any matter which is incidental to the specified subject. So everything would deal under the Article 110 of the Indian Constitution. So additionally, you can go through all these, clauses within Article 110 of the Indian Constitution with which the money bill actually deals with. Right, in fact, so UPSC has already asked a question about this money bill, so therefore you have to be very, very careful about this. Right, so Article 110 clause 3 makes it very, very clear that the Speaker of the Lok Sabha shall have the final authority. Now, in case of any dispute between the Speaker of the any dispute over whether a bill is a money bill or not, the authority or the approval of the Speaker would be considered as a final in determining whether a proposed legislation is a money bill or not. Okay, so That is the actual procedure with respect to the money bill. And in fact, there are certain other laws also which are being passed in previously, right? So in the name of money bills, for example, Finance Act 2019. So this Finance Act of 2019 has also made a far-reaching amendments to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002, right? So this has also been done. The amendments to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act was also done through the money bill route, right? So this, despite this having not the provisions of a money bill, so it was also passed through the money bill route. And additionally, the changes which are made included the alterations to the definitions of what constitutes proceeds of crime under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and a bestowal of enforcement directorate, or giving enforcement directorate certain provisions such as a draconian powers of arrest, attachment, search and seizure. And even Supreme Court in fact upheld many of these amendments previously in the Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary versus Union of India case of 2022, right? So in this case, Supreme Court has upheld this. However, there are certain issues pertaining to the misuse of the money bill, and that we have to discuss here, right? So what are those issues which are pertaining to the misuse of money bill? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, all right. Right, so what are the issues pertaining to the misuse of the money bill? Right, so firstly, there are a lot of instances that we have already discussed. There is a misuse of the money bill route. Okay, so provisions of money bill should not be used to bypass the legislative process. Right, so when money bill route is being introduced, Rajya Sabha has limited powers with respect to the money bills, but through the provisions of money bill or money bill route, so the government time and again bypassing the legislative route, especially the bypassing of Rajya Sabha, or it has been evading the scrutiny of Rajya Sabha, and that is a cause of concern. And in fact, there was a one instance in the year 2016 when Aadhaar Act 2016 was passed. And in fact, the opposition parties at the time also claimed that enabling a fair and equitable distribution of benefits and subsidies is not a matter under Article 110 of the Indian Constitution. Right? So there is no provision in Article 110, Clause 1, Subclause A to Subclause G. There is no mention of enabling fair and equitable distribution of benefits and subsidies. So it is nowhere mentioned under this. So opposition has time and again questioned the government. So hence it has questioned the legality of the entire Aadhaar bill being passed as a money bill to bypass the Rajya Sabha, to evade the scrutiny of the Rajya Sabha. So that was also contested. So since what has been happening, government has the majority. Right, so this majoritarianism wanted the government to bypass Rajya Sabha, and in Rajya Sabha also government does not have the clear majority. And government also, despite due to having a huge number of opposition party members in the Rajya Sabha, it wanted to evade the discussions and debates over the such bills, such important bills. So that's why the government has been increasingly adopting the route of the money bill. In fact, there are a lot of allegations about partition role played by speaker, because speaker is from the ruling party itself. Speaker is from the ruling party itself, and therefore a speaker is biased toward the government. Right, the sole discretion is also given to the speaker for certifying any bill, whether the bill is a money bill or not, and that has further complicated this existing situation. In fact, the Finance Act of 2017 was also passed as a money bill, and in fact it amended the various acts to provide new rules and appointments to various tribunals such as National Green Tribunal also. In fact, the Supreme Court in the past held that money bill should not contain the provisions that are not directly related to the subjects which are listed in the Article 110 of the Constitution of India. Right? Because Article 110 deals with a certain subjects, and based on those subjects only, any bill can be considered as a money bill. So if any bill which is not dealing with the subjects of Article 110, Clause 1, subclause A to subclause G, then that particular bill will not be considered as money bill, and that bill would also require the approval of the both houses of the parliament. The government should not evade the upper house or the scrutiny of the Rajya Sabha. However, it has to be seen that what should be the actual verdict of the Supreme Court regarding the misuse of the money bill route, since a constitution bench is being formed on this, right? So we need to expect that the constitution bench would set the right precedent to prevent the misuse of the money bill route to pass bills by the government. So next important article is with respect to the subcategorization within the scheduled caste. Right? So this is what the Supreme Court has held, that SCs for quota. Right? So Supreme Court has actually held that states can subclassify scheduled castes for quotas. Now what are these quotas? Quotas are nothing, they are just reservations that the government has provided. Now if you look at the structure of India's reservation, 27% of the reservation was given to the OBCs or other backward classes, and it was given based on the Mandal Commission recommendations, right? So Mandal Commission recommendations, based on this recommendation, 27% of the reservations were given to the other backward classes, socially and educationally backward classes in education and government employment. And similarly, 15% of the reservation was given to the scheduled castes, and even 77.5% of the reservation was being given to the scheduled tribes. Right, so this is the reservation pie, and apart from that, 10% of the reservation is also being given to the economically weaker sections as well. However, there has been an increasing demands to subcategorize OBCs, because OBCs doesn't mean it is a homogeneous caste. There are number of castes within the other backward classes. For example, Yadavs is one of the most progressive caste within the OBCs. If you look at Bihar, UP, they are one of the most politically dominant and powerful caste. Right? They are more progressive. However, within OBCs, there are still a backward classes also, socially, economically, educationally backward classes also. So since one or two castes are more progressive within the OBCs, what has been happening? So in this 27% of the reservation, more than 20% of the reservations have been benefiting the progressive sections within the OBCs, and that is the cause of concern. And just 7% or 5% out of 27% is being given to the rest of the OBCs who are socially, economically, educationally backward. So that's why Center has appointed the Rohini Commission, Justice Rohini Commission, for the purpose of subcategorization of other backward classes. This commission was given the task of subcategorization of the other backward classes. However, recently a constitution bench of the Supreme Court has also given its nod for the subcategorization within the SCs, and in fact it is also one of the long standing demand, because within scheduled castes also there are lot of castes. Right, so for example, Mala, a caste, Madika, a caste within the SCs. However, similar to OBCs, within SCs also there are certain progressive sections and there are backward sections also. So if we reorganize or categorize, reclassify the existing 15% of the reservation, then more reservation can be given to the, or reservation benefits can be given to the poor sections within the scheduled caste, and that is the overall objective of subcategorization of SCs or subcategorization of the other backward classes. Now we'll understand the context. The context is that the 6:1 majority judgment on Thursday, a 7-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court, and this constitution bench was headed by Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud, and this 6-by-1 constitution bench of the Supreme Court has held that state governments have the right to subclassify. For example, in each state there are certain castes which are recognized as scheduled castes. Now state government have the power to reclassify those castes, right? State governments were given the power to reclassify or subclassify the scheduled castes notified in the presidential list, so that more reservation benefits can be given to the backward classes within the scheduled caste. So that is the overall intention and overall objective, right? So it is to provide them, the backward classes within the scheduled caste, a more preferable treatment in the public employment and education, so that not only the progressive castes within the OBCs and SCs would get the benefits. However, even the least backward classes or least backward castes within the SCs and OBCs would also get benefited. And in this context, it is important for us to understand this Indira Sonai judgment of 1993, and it is one of the most important judgment of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court has imposed a 50% ceiling on the total reservations in India. And in this Indira Sonai judgment, the Supreme Court has held that it is constitutional to classify the backward classes into backward and more backward classes. Supreme Court in fact given a go ahead to classify other backward classes into two groups. Those two groups, one group is a backward and another group is more backward. So therefore, for more backward classes, more reservation would be given out of the 27% of the reservation, so that this reservation will also benefit the more backward classes within the OBCs. However, this recent 6-by-1 judgment of the Supreme Court has also held that the same principle which was mentioned in the Indira Sonai judgment would also applicable for the scheduled caste also, right? So within the scheduled caste also there are different castes, and those castes would be further reclassified by the respective state governments. However, the principle of reclassification or subclassification will be applicable for scheduled castes if the social position of the constituents within the scheduled caste is not comparable, right? So when we talk about different castes within the scheduled caste and their social position is not at all comparable, then the state governments can actually go ahead with the subclassification of scheduled castes, right? So subcategorization within a class is a constitutional requirement to secure a substantive equality. So it is very important that we need to secure the substantive equality, not absolute equality, but substantive equality. So in order to achieve this substantive equality, we need to ensure that the reservation benefits should be given to the more backward classes within the OBCs and scheduled castes also. And we already knew that when we talk about the other backward classes, within the other backward classes, there is a creamy layer principle. Now, according to this creamy layer principle, within OBCs also there are certain progressive communities. And those progressive castes or families whose family income is more than 8 lakh rupees, so they would be considered as the creamy layer category, and 27% of the reservation benefits for the OBCs would not be extended to the families where their family income is more than 8 lakh rupees. However, one thing that we need to understand, this creamy layer would not be applicable for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes as of now. Right? So when we talk about this creamy layer principle, the government should extend the creamy layer principle to scheduled caste and scheduled tribes also. This is what the Supreme Court has mentioned, that the creamy layer principle should be extended to scheduled caste and even scheduled tribes, right, along with the other backward classes, so that the most progressive castes or most progressive families, for example, imagine that a family A, right? So family A has four members, so out of four members, so two parents A and B, and two parents have two kids, right? So C and D are two kids, and they belong to one caste within scheduled caste. So both their parents have got good government jobs because of the reservation benefit. Now they belong to scheduled caste, and again their children would also get benefited from the reservation. However, imagine about the scheduled castes. So if the reservation benefits are being given to the already progressive families within the scheduled caste, now what about the other castes which are still in the poverty, or which are still facing a lot of social, economic and political deprivations? So therefore a creamy layer should be introduced to exclude the more affluent families from the reservation benefits, whether it is OBCs, SCs or STs. So that is the judgment of the Supreme Court, right? So it is necessary to exclude the affluent individuals or families from the benefits of reservation. And at the same time, by excluding these affluent families, the Supreme Court would make a room for the underprivileged within these specific classes. Now, in fact, the Supreme Court has also said that the state must evolve a policy. There should be a proper policy, and that policy should identify the families from OBCs, SCs, STs, so the creamy layer category, who belong to the creamy layer category within the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, because already OBCs have this creamy layer principle, it would be applicable, right? So once we are able to identify the families, so that will help the government to exclude them from the benefits of the affirmative action. And in fact, we can call it as a positive move, because it would benefit the poorer sections within the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Apart from that, it is also duty of the state to give the preferential treatment to the backward classes of citizens who are not adequately represented in education, who are not adequately represented in government services. However, earlier, Supreme Court in E.V. Chinnaya versus State of Andhra Pradesh case 2004. So in this particular case, Supreme Court has a different judgment, right? So the apex court has held that once a community is included in the presidential list of scheduled caste, so that will be included under Article 341 of the Constitution, right? So under Article 341, President can issue a presidential list. So whenever any community is included in the presidential list of scheduled caste under Article 341 of the Constitution, they become part of the single larger class of people, right? So they will become part of the single larger class of people, casting a wide net for the purposes of reservation. Apart from that, the Supreme Court has also held that state governments cannot make any changes in the presidential list under Article 341, including state governments cannot subclassify or subcategorize the communities within the scheduled caste list. But this judgment is significantly different from the previous judgment of E.V. Chinnaya versus State of Andhra Pradesh case, right? So in fact, this is a welcome move from the Supreme Court. And next important article is that India and Vietnam signed 9 agreements to deepen the strategic partnership and even enhance the cooperation. And recently, Vietnam's Prime Minister, his name was Pham Minh Chinh. So he recently paid an official visit to India. And when we talk about Vietnam, Vietnam is a very, very important partner for India, particularly with respect to India-China concerns. Vietnam also share same concerns with respect to China, because Vietnam also shares its borders with China, right? So previously there were border incursions and invasions from the Chinese side also, how India faced the threat of border incursions into India. Vietnam has also been facing the same problems. So therefore there is a convergence of interest between India and Myanmar, and this has provided an opportunity for India to further step up, to further strengthen its ties with the Vietnam. And in fact, it is a response to Beijing's the string of pearls policy, where Beijing tried to increase its influence in the India's neighborhood, and in a similar way, Vietnam, a close engagement with Vietnam would actually provide India a greater opportunity to contain China in the South China Sea region or Indo-Pacific region, and we'll talk about that, right? So Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently held talks with his Vietnamese counterpart. His name is Pham Minh Chinh in New Delhi, and in fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that they agreed to further deepen India-Vietnam relations. So they're fully committed to strengthen the India-Vietnam relations by increasing economic, strategic, and cultural ties. When we talk about Vietnam, Vietnam is a country with a huge competitiveness in the global markets. Vietnam has also attracting a lot of industries and investments into its economy. It is a growing economy. And in fact, when we talk about the bilateral trade between India and Vietnam, it has reached to around 15 billion US dollars. And in fact, it is said that there is a need for further increasing or further strengthening the bilateral trade between India and Vietnam. So this is very, very crucial for further strengthening relations between these two countries. And in fact, both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vietnamese Prime Minister have recognized the importance of convergence in their worldview. So when we talk about India's worldview, India believes in strategic autonomy. India also believes in a multilateral world order would best serve its interests, and similarly Vietnam also have the similar worldview, and that's why we can say that there is a convergence in their worldview. And in fact, so they also expressed support for a greater voice and a role for the global south in the international affairs, both in India and Vietnam. So in fact, they appreciated the multi-dimensional institutional mechanisms between the two countries in different fields. For example, when we talk about India-Vietnam engagement, so the engagement spans from different areas. For example, foreign policy, security, maritime domain, defense cooperation, parliamentary exchanges, trade and investment in manufacturing, technology, agriculture, healthcare, civil aviation, ICT, information and communication technologies. So that includes space, nuclear technology, tourism and culture, right? So these are the different areas where India has been engaging with Vietnam, or both India and Vietnam have been engaging regularly on these areas. And in fact, both India and Vietnam and the high level dignitaries have welcomed the signing of a plan of action for the implementation of comprehensive strategic partnership for the period of 2024 and 28. So these 4 years, the plan of action for the implementation of a comprehensive strategic partnership. So they also signed the strategic partnership. And apart from that, India has also welcomed investments from Vietnam in certain areas. Now, when we talk about investments from Vietnam in certain areas, they span from agriculture, agro-processing, aquaculture, wood processing, urban development. So these are different areas where Vietnam has been investing in India. So you have to go through all these areas, right? So in whichever areas Vietnam has the expertise, then Vietnam has been investing or ready to invest in India. So you can also see on the map Vietnam's capital, right? So and Vietnam has also been sharing a long border with China also. Okay, so in fact, both India and Vietnam have agreed to further enhance the defense cooperation. They're determined to enhance the defense cooperation, and this defense cooperation would be based on the mutual interest, and the priorities of both countries would contribute to the greater stability and wider Indo-Pacific region. And in fact, Vietnam is also part of the Indo-Pacific region, and Vietnam has also been facing increasing threats of China in the South China Sea. right? Both India and other countries in the Asian region, including Vietnam, have common concerns with respect to the growing challenges from China. The two leaders have also appreciated the bilateral development cooperation under the framework of Mekong Ganga cooperation. So India and other Southeast Asian countries are working together as part of the Mekong Ganga cooperation, and India and Vietnam will be working on this as part of this cooperation through quick impact development projects, and high-tech training and even educational scholarships would be given to the Vietnamese students who like to who would like to pursue their studies in India. And in fact, both the leaders have encouraged greater student, faculty and research engages between universities, think tanks and other institutions in both the countries, particularly in the context of India's Vikasit Bharat 2047 goal. So we wanted to become a developed country by 2047, and similarly Vietnam also has such goal, right? So Vietnam's vision of becoming a high income developed country by 2045, and India also wanted to become a Vikasit Bharat, a developed country, by the year 2047. So in fact, both India and Vietnam have strongly supported the further strengthening of ASEAN, that is Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. And this ASEAN and India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership would further complement the bilateral relations with the respective member states, including Vietnam also, because Vietnam is also a member country which is part of the ASEAN grouping. And both the leaders have also appreciated ASEAN-India joint statement on cooperation on Asian outlook on the Indo-Pacific region. Now, Indo-Pacific, geostrategically a very important region, has been gaining a lot of prominence. And in fact, all the countries have accepted Asian centrality in the Indo-Pacific region. Right, so both the leaders from both the countries have appreciated India and ASEAN joint statement on cooperation on the Asian outlook on the Indo-Pacific for peace, stability and prosperity of the region, because that would provide more and more opportunities for number of countries including India and Vietnam to further their cooperation between the Asian outlook on the Indo-Pacific and Indo-Pacific Oceans initiative. And India has also appreciated Vietnam's consistent support for India in international platforms and international forums. However, Vietnam is one of the a supporter of India's bid to get India's permanent membership of the reformed UN Security Council. We all knew that India wanted to become part of the United Nations Security Council, and Vietnam is one of the strong supporter of India's bid for the permanent membership of the UN Security Council, right? So today we have one mains practice question. So that question is with respect to the subcategorization of the backward classes or even subcategorization of the SCs that the Supreme Court has recently asked the state governments to do, so that the substantive equality can be achieved within the poorer sections or more backward sections within the OBCs and scheduled caste. So therefore we'll try to discuss about this question. The question is, discuss the need for subcategorization of backward classes and what are the challenges that lie in the subcategorization of other backward classes and scheduled caste. Explain. This is the question. The approach is that in the introduction you need to describe what is subcategorization. So you just briefly describe what is subcategorization, and then the first part of the question, that is what is the need for subcategorization of backward classes, and in the third part write some challenges and limitations in such exercise of subcategorization and conclude the answer by writing a way forward. So you just write a way forward. Right, so first and foremost you need to briefly describe what is subcategorization of OBCs and scheduled caste. We all knew that OBCs were given the reservation 27% based on the Mandal Commission recommendations in jobs and education, and similarly scheduled castes were also given a reservation of 15% in government employment and education. However, there has been a legal debate for other reservation categories too. So in the year 2022, the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court has actually reopened the debate on the subcategorization of scheduled castes and even subcategorization of scheduled tribes also for the reservations. And in fact, the other backward classes, the debate arises out of perception that only a few affluent families or few affluent communities within the OBCs were getting benefited from the reservation of 27%. Because when we talk about the OBCs, within the central list of OBCs, there are 2,600 and different castes from various states. So out of 2,600 different castes from different states, only few castes are getting the majority benefit of this 27% of the reservation, but the poorer castes, most backward castes within the OBC's central list are not actually getting the benefit of 27% of the reservation. And that was the idea which inspires subcategorization of the OBCs. And in fact, the central government has also constituted Justice Rohini Commission for the purpose of subcategorization of OBCs. Right? The argument for creating subcategories within the OBCs is that it would ensure equitable distribution of representation among all OBC communities, or it would result in substantive equality among all the OBC communities. Now, the second part of the answer is, what is the need for subcategorization of backward classes? Why we need to do the subcategorization of the backward classes? Right, so we all knew that 27% of the reservation is being given to the OBCs, and 15% of the reservation is also being given to the scheduled castes in education and jobs. Right, so there is no doubt that it addresses the socio-economic disparities in India to some degree. We cannot say that it has completely transformed the caste structure. It has completely uplifted all the weaker sections within OBCs and within SCs. We cannot say that, but certainly there is some degree of progress within these castes. But the benefits of reservations have not been distributed equitably. Reservation benefits have not been distributed equitably across different castes, and that is the problem. And that's why we need subcategorization of the backward classes and even large segments of the weaker sections and even backward classes, so they continue to have no access to education or meaningful employment opportunities also. This is another major problem. Okay, so there are a large number of weaker, for example, you take OBCs itself. Within OBCs there are 2,600 and different castes, but all the castes would not get benefited from 27% of the reservation. Only the progressive castes would getting the benefits of reservation. So therefore, the large segments of the weaker sections and the backward classes within these SCs and OBCs continue to have no access to quality of education and even meaningful employment opportunities also. And apart from that, the relatively rich and the dominant sections within the OBCs and scheduled castes have tended to take up the disproportionately larger share of this reservation pie, and this is also another reason that has been pointing out towards the need for subcategorization within OBCs and SCs. And apart from that, we can say that there is a clear failure in effectively preventing the large sections of the creamy layer from taking the benefit or advantage of the quota system, and the recent example being the IAS officer, trainee IAS officer from Maharashtra. Right, so despite she is actually having a wealth of more than in crores, she got the OBC certificate, and the OBC certificate says that she won't belong to the creamy layer category. Right, so therefore there is a clear failure in effectively preventing the large sections of the creamy layer from taking the advantage of the quota system. And that would be detrimental to the poorer sections among their own groups, among their own OBC group. So to ensure that there should be a more equitable distribution and substantive equality is achieved, and these reservation benefits are benefiting the deserved, needy and most poorer sections, there is a need to differentiate the caste groups which are coming under the backward classes and which are also coming under the scheduled castes on the basis of their social and economic backwardness. And that is how we could provide a better we could ensure that these reservation benefits would actually reach to the more poor, backward and deserved sections. However, it is not free from the challenges. There are a lot of challenges and limitations in such an exercise. For example, government requires a lot of data to determine who are socially and economically backward classes. And that is one of the most important challenge, right? So government lacks information and government also lacks credible data about OBCs and scheduled castes also. In the year 2011, socio-economic caste census were not even made public, and that is another issue which could create the issues such as transparency and accountability issues. And in fact, enumeration of OBC data is administratively very complex thing. And in fact, the information lacks the completeness, information lacks accuracy, since state and central list of OBCs are distinct and different. Right? There are a lot of challenges and a lot of limitations. We need to overcome such limitations. A comprehensive data collection mechanism should be established so that the reservation benefits could actually be provided to the needy, deserved and poor sections within the OBCs and scheduled castes as per the directions, as per the judgment of the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our video, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.